And then the last thing is some super cool work that we've started and have been piloting with our supply chain leadership team. And we're going to have a chance to hear from Paul and Allison in just a moment as I invite them onto stage to help bring this to life. But we have started to bring in partners with the Developmental Edge and Aspira Leadership to help us think about both the immunity to change, which if you've heard that term thrown around, it's a book written by two Harvard professors, Lisa Leahy and Robert Keegan, all around understanding our own immunities to change. What are some of those deeply rooted assumptions and beliefs that we have that kind of get in our way of making changes that we know we need to make to continue to develop and grow as humans and deliver in the future. And it's human behavior. So like, we all have them. So it's not criticism, but it does suggest and provide some really practical frameworks to do some of that deep digging, kind of starting with ourselves. And we found ways to scale that to the team. And that's what we're going to hear about. We combine that with this notion of an all-in team, which is really around all-in behaviors. What behaviors are we exhibiting, rooted in trust and connectivity specifically, that allow us, when combined with this immunity to change work, starts to unlock new ways of working. And it starts to create what I'll describe as like this proverbially like this flywheel, right, of self-awareness, the notion of developmental sprints, which aligns so nicely with IDPs and so much of the development work that we're doing, and then getting feedback and turning that into a series of ongoing sprints that we can do to really start to unlock and change our own mindset, that then we can show up differently each and every day with the work that we're leading to drive change. And I think there's a lot to this. I think it's very powerful. We're at very early stages. We're thinking about how this could scale, where this could scale, starting with specific leadership teams, and more to come. But I think the best way to start to bring this to life is to use a use case. So with that, I'd like to invite two of my very good friends, Allison Thomas and Paul Gallagher, up to stage to join me to chat a little bit further. Thank you. Well, I don't know that these two wonderful folks need introduction, but if you don't know, Allison leads our HR team for our global supply chain, and Paul is our fearless leader of our global supply chain. And as you heard Jacqueline say, over 16,000, do I have that right? Employees, I mean, such an important part of our history and the work that gets done to deliver on General Mills goals. So we've got two of our best experts sitting right here. And so as I mentioned, supply chain has been our pilot and the entry point for some of this work around mindset. So Paul, I'd actually love to start with you. So over the last year, you've been working very hard in partnership with Allison to do work with your leadership team, embarking on this journey about growing change mindset, building an all-in team behavior, cultivating this notion of a deliberately developmental organization, development as a team sport. Can you talk a little bit about why this has been such an important priority for you and your organization? What aspiration or vision are you working towards that has made an investment, and it is, in fact, a big investment, but making this investment right now?
Absolutely, and first of all, thank you. Thank you for inviting me today. Delighted to be here. We know we couldn't do what we do without all the fearless leaders that we have in the room, so we appreciate everything that you do for us. When we looked back kind of a few years ago and we were saying, okay, what do we want to be known for? What difference do we want to make? We all know that I don't have to preach to the choir here, it's all about people. And as much as we've got fantastic processes and we've got phenomenal facilities, it is about how you engage in your workforce in order for it to do what we do on a day in, day out basis. Obviously, the leadership team plays a massive part in that. And as we looked and evolved in what we wanted to be known for as a team, we worked on, well, what do we want to do differently? You all have probably been involved in teams that have been wildly successful. And I'm exceptionally fortunate that I've got a phenomenal team of exceptional leaders, without a shadow of a doubt. Each one of them have the capability of adding even more value in any organization that they're in, but hopefully within General Mills. So having that team of exceptional leaders doesn't always translate to an exceptional team. And what I mean by that is that we just don't want to be a team of exceptional leaders. We want to be that Stanley Cup team. Now, you were all wired in a way where we're very competitive. But also, you all know, to be a Stanley Cup team winner, you have to actually release some of those shackles that you have held on to that has allowed you to be so successful for the greater good of the team. So how we were trying to figure out was that what do we need to do differently? How do we need to act? How do we need to behave? How do we support and be vulnerable and be open to the change that's required for us as a leader in order for it to be that exceptional team, to be that Stanley Cup winning team? And that's not easy because we're wired to be different. So what we're trying to do is to figure out how do we rewire the team so that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
Yeah, I think that's really important, this notion of the Stanley Cup team. And I hope we've all picked up on that. That's what the highest honor in hockey. It's a hockey sports reference, winning the Stanley Cup. Not a
Which I didn't know coming from Ireland, but now I know.
We've learned. I'm learning with you.
Yeah.
I also don't spend my time watching hockey, but I know that many, many folks do. And so, this notion of you talked about like trust and connectivity. So Allison, as we expand, this work has felt like it felt like an intersection of a couple things to me personally. You've got kind of change agility and change readiness, this change mindset piece. You've got some team effectiveness, like how are we working and partnering as an organization, shaping our culture. You've got some leadership development. So it's taking in these things, and as Paul talked, it's really about how do we adjust our behaviors, change our mindset, how do we think about those deeply held beliefs and assumptions, this notion of what has gotten us here will not get us there. So I'm curious if you would be so kind to bring this to life for the group. Each member of Paul's team, as we went through this, came up with their own personal development plan. We used the Immunity to Change framework to do that. For those, we can share some podcasts so you can listen to hear this more. But there's a notion of declaring a personal development goal, thinking about what are some of the hidden commitments that you hold. These, they often refer to it as, what's your worry box? What are the things that you're like most afraid of? And then thinking through what assumptions are we making because of those hidden beliefs that then get in our own way, and what's an experiment that you can do, design a little developmental sprint, if you will, to help work on building and going through your own immunity to change. So if you would be so kind to walk us through that and maybe share what are the things that you've encountered personally as you've shaped your own plan, I think that would really bring this to life.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. I'll do just one quick sidestep before I answer that question and say, as Paul and I talked, every team that we've been on or here at General Mills has the ambition to be that Stanley Cup team. And so the work we did together was really to say, so then why isn't every team a Stanley Cup team? Why isn't every really well-intended leader showing up the very best that they could possibly be? And so I would say you're absolutely right that it was like, okay, there's something here, but we don't know exactly what aspect of this that we need to study, which was really where we started doing the work with the Developmental Edge, doing the work with John Footer Connect and Aspire Leadership from an executive coaching standpoint to start trying to peel this back. And that's what I would say this journey really has been, is a journey of studying, learning new things, peeling a layer back, studying, learning new things, experimenting, peeling a layer back. And so you brought to light a really important piece of this, which is the Immunity to Change map, which is a platform that can be used kind of over and over again to practice testing some things that may have something to do with why you as a leader or you as a team aren't always operating at that Stanley Cup level. And so if I give you a personal example, when we were in the session, the leaders of the developmental edge said, okay, we want you to pick something that on a scale of, kind of 1 to 5, 4 to 5 being kind of the zone of, if you were to get better at this, it would meaningfully kind of impact your overall impact as a leader. And so, team, I have been a part of a lot of these sessions, so I automatically tried to pick something really easy that wasn't going to get me too deep into having to reveal too much about myself with my, still fairly new supply chain leadership team. So the thing that I picked that was very real at a 4 or 5 level was I'm spending a lot of time with my team and in team meetings, and that's making it difficult for me to at times spend the time where I uniquely need to spend my time that the team can't do for me. So that was the first column. Very simply, I'm spending a lot of time in team meetings. The second column was, well, why am I doing that? And it's not, kind of what are you doing or not doing that you should be. It's literally a diagnosis of an evaluation of what are you doing or not doing. And it's like, well, I'm going to, these different meetings. When I'm being asked by one of my team members a question, I immediately go into starting to work it, together with them and collaborating and all these, kind of, again, very specific 5, 6 things that you're doing to reinforce that I'm losing time spending it, kind of in these ways. Well, then we get to the worry box. And the worry box, you just basically take a look at the things in the second column and you say, well, why might I be doing that? And so, you start coming up with non-judgmental reasons why you're behaving in that way. And it came to things like, I like to add value. I think that, I have some knowledge, skills, and experience that maybe my team doesn't have, so I can help them, kind of by sharing that. If I don't do that, will my team even know what I do? Or do I, have a question about what value I actually add, those types of things. And so then underneath your worry box, you write your commitment statements. And commitment statements are actually written as double negatives, which took me a hot second to kind of figure out. But, I am committed to never being seen as not adding value. I'm being committed to never not being able to answer the questions that my leaders might have of me, kind of right there on the spot. And so all of a sudden you're already starting to go like, this is interesting, reflective, etc. And so the next step of things is to really start thinking through what is a safe experiment that I could do to test whether or not there's room that just possibly these deeply held, kind of worry box concerns might be a little more flexible than I'm currently holding onto them being. And so very simply, I set that as my goal, my assumption, and made an experiment of taking a look at my calendar and pulling myself out of just a couple meetings that I felt like absolutely were gonna be an okay place for me to test this. And that's exactly what I did. And you know what? General Mills didn't burn down.
Yeah.
My team didn't give me the feedback that, they weren't getting kind of the support and value that they needed from me. Paul didn't berate me that I didn't have, an answer to a question that he needed, kind of, again, at fingertips notice, et cetera. And so that gave some proof to the fact that we hold assumptions all the time that are unconscious and that we're unaware of, and that by repeating this process over and over again, we can get to these deeper levels of how are we operating, how are we spending our time, and might there be flexibility to allow us to raise up even beyond that, because we are personally, keeping ourselves held by these deeply held beliefs.
Yeah, I think it's so important. It's so interesting to talk to the developmental edge. So I think you can see this is pretty simple to flow through, but it quickly gets into a highly reflective state, right? And that's hard. Like, you got to dig deep here. As I talk to the developmental edge, they've done this across hundreds of organizations. They've all the way with kindergartners, 5-year-olds, up through C-suite, CEOs, I mean, the gamut. So like there's something to this. But what Andy Fleming from Developmental Edges, he and I were talking about my own development. You know, he's like, decades upon decades of research. We can lump almost all of the experiments that people do, the developmental sprints, down to like one of three categories. Letting go, so something about like letting go, control, right? This need to relinquish some control. Stepping up, so really raising your game and leaning into new opportunities in a new way. Or reaching out through connections to others. And I think that's what we heard, what so many people's goals were. I know mine, you know, control, for sure. How many people feel like they have too much, like, for sure that's a thing for me. For sure that impacts how I show up. For sure I need to be thinking about that. And so I just thought that was really, really, really interesting. And the thing about that is, they said, you know, Kate, which of those three things do you think would have the greatest impact if we could collectively move the dial as a company? And I said, letting go. And why? Because it allows other people to step up. So with that, you know, we've only got time quickly here, Allison, and then Paul, I want to close with you, but you talked about the individual component. There's a team component. So we're, you know, talked just very briefly about the possibility of scaling this, like how you could have a team developmental goal and how you're addressing that.
Perfect. So we've talked about this a little bit, but all in, the concept of all in means I am going to work on myself and contribute at the highest level I can. And I am going to be all in on my teammates, their goals, and what their organizations need to accomplish. Again, sounds simple, but we have spent most of our careers optimizing our space and then doing some addition. So I'm gonna take my space, and I'm gonna take Kate's space, and I'm gonna take Cheryl's space, and I'm gonna add it up, and we are gonna have delivered amazing things. What's really different about this work and being all in is you shift from not just optimization of your space, but really, really, really thinking through things through both the lens of the supply chain leadership team and what the supply chain leadership team and the organization needs to deliver for this great company, and also at the enterprise level. What really, really is the role of the supply chain in the Accelerate strategy and beyond? That's really important because it then shifts how you're gonna be spending your time and your responsibility to your other team members. And so one of the goals that we came out of Boston with was how to practice with this was to take on the role and wear the hat of the chief supply chain officer in all the rooms that we were in together, and when we were the only person in the room representing the supply chain chief officer. And so that might, again, seem fairly simplistic, but it's completely different. You're not listening just for your piece. You're not waiting in the conversation just to make your ad. You're thinking about really, really what needs to happen here, and how do I represent Paul? How do I represent Becky? How do I represent any of the other members of the supply chain team, even though I'm the HR person, you know, the HR leader in the room at that time. And so I think that what we've been doing is really experimenting in that space, Kate. And so in terms of scalability, again, you don't pick one of these and you're done and you perfect it. You pick experiment after experiment after experiment to continue to grow and develop, both individually and as a team together.
Yeah, I love that. And pairing up, like, talking about it with regularity as a group, having, you know, kind of small cohorts that you can debrief your own individual development really becomes amplification for the reach of this work, which leads me, as we kind of close, Paul, I know this unanimously positive kind of results as we surveyed your team after going through this, probably unlike anything I've ever seen from years and decades of work in this space. What are some of the changes that you're seeing already, early days still, as a result of this work? And like, what are some of the watch outs or the things that you're looking for to give us indications of, are we on the right track or are we not?
Yeah, good question. I do want to go back to and not miss the point about the change that we're seeing. Yeah. You know, what we've seen as a team, we've probably evolved in a few months in what normally would have taken years. And we've built trust. And trust, as you know, is the hardest thing to build and it's the easiest thing to break. But we started off, and when we started off, it felt a bit like it was group therapy, and that we were all in a kind of semicircle and all telling about our worries and all the experiments. And you know what? They were relatively safe. And everybody goes, as you all have been on developmental courses, you kind of go, oh yeah, okay. But the second iteration was different. And that was different because there was a lot more vulnerability. There was a lot more, not just respect, but an expectation of each other on the team in that what they were really going to work on. And we got into some of the experiments that were more dealing about insecurities that people had as leaders rather than tasks that they wanted to achieve, because it's easy to identify tasks. And now, as we shared each one of those to everybody, everybody's in there helping and supporting that leader be the best that they can be and the leader that their people deserve to have. And that is different. So that's easy to say, and we're early on the road, but what am I seeing that's different?
Yeah.
What I do see is I see my team step up and do the role for me on my behalf for the enterprise. They are taking the accountability where I don't always need to be in the room to make a decision. That also means I have to be vulnerable and let them make that decision and support them, which I do. And that's also hard to do as a leader because we are so ingrained in accountability, we want to make sure that we're involved in everything in order for it to get it right. We don't have to be. We've got phenomenal people, phenomenal leaders, and we have great guardrails in General Mills that keeps us straight and focused on the right thing. The second part that I see is I see the connectivity across each and every one of that team. It's not perfect. We're not Stanley Cup yet, but you can see that we're starting to build off each other and build for each other. And that's different. And the third piece that I am experiencing is one of my experiments is that I have a tendency to be, I like to be in the hub and spoke. So I kind of manage, my natural style is to manage hub and spoke. So I go out, get a piece of information, come back, get it off everybody else. In a matrix organization, it's fantastic for me, but I don't create the connection around the wheel. So one of the things that I'm doing, which is a very simple experiment, is that every Monday morning for half an hour, I don't spend any more time than half an hour on it, I explain what did I do last week, what was successful, wasn't, what I need to work on, what am I focused on this week, and then what am I thinking about for the future. The amount of feedback that I'm getting about trying to clarify what I'm working on during the week has been exponential. Why? Because I'm the best one-liner, which is fantastic for me, but it doesn't explain what I'm trying to do. So therefore, the team getting true clarity about what's actually on my mind is allowing them being focused on what they need to deliver rather than running around and thinking that they know the answer for the question I'm trying to ask. And that has allowed them be very, very focused on what they need to do and achieve, more so than it's actually helping me. So don't underestimate the power of these small sprints and the ability for it to test yourself in spaces that you haven't been either nervous to do in the past or you felt wasn't required, because I think that's what's truly making the difference for us. What am I worried and concerned about? Not worried and concerned about. I'm more aware that we will falter. To error is human, and we will get it wrong. And it'll probably be the difference between intent and impact. And it'll be somebody's intention to do something or say something in a positive that comes across as negative. It's purely down to communication. And I think that's now our next stage, is that how do we prepare ourselves for that falter, because it will happen, and then to be able to navigate out through that. But I do feel that we've cracked open a great opportunity for us to be differential and hopefully leave more just of the things that you're proud of and what you do in your career, but a legacy that you can look back on and the difference that you've made in people's lives.
I love that. I think it's great. And you heard Paul, just as he was talking so naturally, he has to let go to let his team step up. You can start to see how that the need of an underpinning of trust, psychological safety, vulnerability is a really important thread through this work. And you can even, I hope, start to see some connection to frameworks that we talk about all the time at General Mills, engaging leader behaviors. Like, it unlocks this immunity to change and doing work to really focus in on how we change our mindset, allows us to show up differently and display those engaging leader behaviors in a whole new light. And so really excited for the supply chain leadership team and supply chain organization as this scales. Really excited for General Mills as we continue to think about how and where we can bring this in and how that may look in the future. I think the possibilities are tremendous, and I'm just so grateful to the two of you for being pioneers for us, and we're so excited to be going on the journey with you. So thank you so much. Aren't they fantastic? And I hope you found this super energizing. Thanks, Kate.
Thank you.